Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Try Harder Talkback. I'm Sandy Klein. We're going to begin with my introduction of the guests, and I will start with the director, Debbie Lum, who is an award-winning documentary filmmaker who's based in San Francisco. Her work explores subject matters with the Asian and Asian American communities. Try Harder, her most recent doc, premiered at 2021 Sundance Film Festival to rave reviews. Her previous doc, Seeking Asian Female, premiered at South by Southwest and was a fan favorite on PBS's Independent Lens and was featured on This American Life. Diagonal to Debbie Lum is Dr. Frank Andrusani. With 17 years of school counseling experience, Dr. Andrusani is well-versed in student success based on academic, career, and personal social development standards. He is a school counselor, college consultant, licensed associate counselor, and adjunct professor. His proficiency in Spanish and Italian allows him to work with a diverse client population. And Dr. Andrusani was the former guidance director at Teaneck High School and is currently serves as New Jersey's Pascack Regional School District. And look who we have on this panel, Jeremy Lentz, Executive Director of the Teaneck Film Festival. And for the past 18 years, he has served as director at Lentz & Lentz, SAT Prep, the mom and pop company that was founded 50 years ago to provide high quality, moderately priced SAT, PSAT, and ACT preparatory services to students in the tri-state area and Massachusetts and Rhode Island. Jeremy is a graduate of McGill University. And of course, in Montreal, as I said, he's the executive director of the Teaneck Film Festival. Before we begin questioning the panel, I want to start by saying Lowell High School received national attention after the release of Try Harder. And to that end, its admissions policy changed to a lottery system, a response to a lack of diversity in the school's student body. And California State University's system just voted to eliminate using standardized tests like the SAT and ACT for admission to its 23 campuses. Uh-oh, Jeremy. Advocates for underrepresented students argued that standardized tests discriminated against them. I'd like to begin this discussion by going right to Debbie Lum and saying, what was the catalyst for making this movie?
Well, hello. And the inspiration was really very personal. I mean, I am a mom. And when I first started making the film, my oldest daughter was entering preschool. But all around me, like the parents were already stressing out about college and wondering, if I send my kid to this preschool, is it going to get them into what college? And so, that was kind of sort of shocking as a parent. And I wanted to, I've always made films about the Asian American experience. And I was really interested in sort of discovering and exploring the stereotype of the tiger mother. So, he's referenced quite a bit in Try Harder, but I was really thinking about it from a parent's perspective until I met the students at Lowell High School. And then I just realized that, this is the perspective that is really missing in all of this, and all of the college admissions frenzy that are hit, national headlines. The students' voices is quite buried in it. We're really looking at it from an adult perspective. And when I spent some time speaking to students, it was a very different set of concerns, and what I really wanted to do was just to give voice to their story and help us kind of understand the issue through that way.
Frank and Jeremy, did this movie surprise you in any way or shock you, or hey, it is what it is?
Well, for me, I see it even in New Jersey. I see it with many families, many students, just the stress about going to college, getting into their top schools, and really then thinking and internalizing the fact that if they don't get into these schools, their whole academic 4 years at a high school was a failure. And some of the things that you heard in the film were echoed really in what I see every day.
Yeah, and for me as well, the student body and the families that are featured in the film, they're typical of the types of families that we work with every day, especially in your more competitive school districts. So nothing, I think, that was documented in the film seemed particularly out of the ordinary in those type of school districts. Obviously, Lowell is one snapshot in wide variety of different stories. And when you deal with different high schools at different parts of the country and different socioeconomics, academics, all of that, the stories can be quite different.
Debbie, as I watched this film, and for me, I mean, I had a physical reaction to this film, but there was so much for me to ingest. But I remember, talking to the screen when several of the students said, yeah, I applied to 26 colleges. And it was like, what? Yeah. I mean, that's nuts.
It's really crazy. And when I was, back in the day, when I was a long time ago, when I was applying, I think I applied to 3 or 4. And people have asked me, what is one of, I'm not an expert, I'm sitting with 2 people who are experts on the college admissions issue. And the one thing that you're pointing to, something that is really, I think, one of the issues, which is the number of schools that kids are applying to, because there were many students we spoke to who applied to that number of colleges, and the amount of work that they have to put into it, every single application, all the money that parents are spending on that. And just because they don't feel there's any certainty in the process, that there's this sense that, it doesn't, it is almost like a lottery, and I'm sure you guys have better, insight into that, but it causes a lot of anxious behavior.
I would think so. I mean, come on, Frank, that's nuts.
Well, I agree, because I think oftentimes what you see is students say, I'll just apply to all the Ivies. I have a better chance to get into one of them. So I always say it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality, and really finding the best fit school for the student. I personally recommend anywhere between 8 to 10. You want to, go with 12 schools, or really 8 to 10 schools, or really categorizing them and saying, okay, here are my safety schools, here are my reach schools, and here are my target schools. And really having a category that fits the best fit student. Even if I was thinking, when I looked at the film and just watching Rachel, now Brown University, great school, even if that was her reach school and she maybe wanted to piggyback that with another reach school, great, fine. But I think to apply to all the reach schools in the hopes of getting into one, or just throwing a bunch of schools against the wall, seeing what sticks, is really just the wrong approach. And really you could see the stress. I think Debbie made a great point about the supplemental materials required for each of these schools. And now not every school has the same rigor in supplemental materials, but the schools that we're talking about in that film, you're spending hours upon hours of time, and you're really spreading yourself thin. In addition, you have to be a student that, I think they gave about 4,000 AP exams. That's, unbelievable.
There's a comment that I'm going to read to you from someone in the audience that pointed out that these students would be superstars if they attended mid-tier colleges, but that's not part of the plan, is it?
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's interesting about this film, is that these students were so focused on just, I need to get into an Ivy. And if I don't get into an Ivy, that defines, my success in my career later in life, and I'll amount to nothing if I don't get into an Ivy. And absolutely, the person that said that comment, and what we try to tell our students is, as much as students are trying to find a school that's a right the right fit for them. It's also, the school also trying to make sure that they're matching the right student with the school and vice versa. So again, varying those options and understanding that there are loads of other schools. And if your academics are that strong, there's so many schools out there that want you in their student body, that are willing to give you potentially a free ride, a full scholarship. And you're going to graduate with an amazing degree in schools that have access to wonderful alumni associations. And one of the other things too that I think is important, we're talking about high school kids going to undergrad here. Nowadays, especially in these careers that these students are looking at, there's a lot after undergraduate that these students aren't realizing. So, graduate school and postgrad, all that stuff is going to play probably even a bigger role. So, as far as going to a school that may be a lot more affordable for your parents, if you're able to get money, where you're going to get a great education and you're going to be able to maintain a great grade point average, will help you to get into maybe that Ivy for your grad school. Those are important factors to consider. And I think, with many of the students in the film, it's like they're missing that mark, and by just being so Ivy centric, Ivy focused.
The sense that I got, Debbie, from a majority of the students was it didn't matter where the hell they got in terms of their list. It's not like I really have to go to Harvard. It was I have to go to Harvard, or I have to go to Yale, or I have to go to Princeton or Cornell. It just didn't matter where, sort of back in the day, oh God, Harvard is my school, that kind of thing. That seemed to be missing in this movie.
I've asked that. And I, when I started out making the film, it wasn't just at Lowell High School. It was actually throughout the San Francisco Bay Area that I spoke to principals and counselors and parents. And actually, I spoke to a college counselor who didn't serve the Lowell community, but I asked them that question, like, do parents and students ever come to you and say, what's the right college for me? And she just said, no. I mean, nobody asks that anymore. It's really, how do I get my kid into the top echelon school? And when you think about it, it's like, it really is a compounded problem, because Lowell High School is a public high school. It was historically a way for people, without the means to get an education on par with a private school. And it was also historically kind of a feeder school into the top UC system schools, which are public institutions, and specifically Berkeley, which is what Mr. Shapiro, one of our teachers in the film, points out, that it used to be very much a feeder school. Lowell students would go into Berkeley. And it really was a much more relaxed kind of all around high school, where sports was really important. The kids came out and they had the best dances, in San Francisco, things like that, but the way that our UC system in California has been eroded, I mean, it's just, there's so many pressures. The kids can't get into Berkeley anymore. It's just a compounded problem, so I understand it from many different perspectives. I think that the parents and the students do feel a sense of a stress and real concern about, what their, college future will be like. But at the same time, I do often tell parents that if you think about all the kids that were meant to get into these top schools and they didn't get in, they're going to be going to the next school, and all of those schools will be filled with these amazing students.
Yeah, like somebody mentioned in the chat, exactly. Another question that I see here, which is very interesting, is there follow-up on how the kids are doing?
Yeah, they're doing really great. And I like to tell the story that Alvin in the film, who's often, people tell us, is one of the favorites, especially the moms. Love Alvin. When he watched the film for the first time, he said, gosh, I wish I could just go back in time and give that high school kid a big hug and tell him it's going to be okay. Because, it really, that's kind of you know, maybe the moral to the story is that, you know, these students that are, especially these kids that we're profiling, the high achieving kids who, you know, frankly, are under so much stress that they've been pointed out as like at risk for mental health issues.
Oh, I bet.
That they actually, you know, should feel better about where they're at. You know, they're gonna be okay, and there doesn't need to be this sort of like make or break mentality about high school. But yeah, they're all doing really well. They're almost all graduated from college. Alvin is applying to medical school. Actually, Rachel is also applying to medical school. Sophia is a really interesting example for all of the college hopefuls out there. She, you know, she actually wrote a letter to students that we include in some of our resources about how she really didn't understand the college process. And UCLA was just a wonderful school for her, but that she probably would have felt that way about any college that she went to, actually. And she just didn't know that at the time when she was applying, that it was, you know, she had no way to know because of, you know, the limited access that she had to, you know, how different it would be in college. Just, you know, you're 17 years old and you don't really know, but
Right.
she, it's like, it's sort of what Shay says at the end of the film, that he could make a college his own. And that is what she did. So.
Frank and Jeremy, do you find that in your jobs, you have to talk these students down?
I don't know that it's talking students down, but I think, you know, again, what Debbie was saying about the students in the film and you know, not understanding that probably all these schools may be good fits in their own way. It's really about talking to the student and having intelligent conversations about figuring out, okay, what do you want to major in? What do you want to do in life? Where do you want to live? Do you do better in a city versus a suburb versus somewhere that's more rural? Do you want a small school where you're going to get more individualized attention, higher teacher to student ratio? Or do you do better in a larger school where there's, you know, maybe big sorority, fraternity life, big sports teams? And making sure that the students are going to schools that are aligned with the things that they want to do. And that's critical, you know, not only in terms of a major, because students will go to schools and realize when they get there, gee, I thought I wanted to be pre-med. I hate pre-med. And now I'm at this school and there's nothing for me here. So guess what? They end up having to transfer and go through this whole process again and end up moving someplace else because it wasn't well thought out, versus a student that may be undecided on a career, but knows that they're picking a school that has a diversified enough, you know, academic body where if they change their mind, that they can still stay in that school and find a major that's going to be right for them. And also understanding, look, you're going to be living here for the next 4 years in your life. So if, you know, you want to be in a city and you know that's where you thrive and you want to be around. I know for me, that was a big determining factor in my career, was I needed to be in an urban environment. I wanted to be in a city. I wanted to have access to cultural things. I wanted to be around all different kinds of people. I knew I wouldn't do well in a more rural setting. My parents wanted me to go to a SUNY school for the obvious reasons. State university, you know, it was much more affordable. You graduate, you get a, you know, good degree, but I knew that it wasn't going to be the right match for me. And I think it's really having intelligent conversations and sitting down with the students and the parents and setting realistic goals, you know, and having, you know, a tiered approach, which is what students should have. You know, you shouldn't be applying to all Ivies. If you qualify, pick one or two that are going to work. And then, you know, you're going to pick other schools outside of your Ivies. And, you know, as Frank will talk about, having safe schools. And I think that's the most logical and intelligent way to approach it. And I think when it's approached that way, it takes a lot of the pressure off, where they can just exhale and understand this isn't a race as to who's going to get to the best school, thinking if I only get into Harvard, then that means something. It's not about that. It's about finding the school that's the right fit for you, where you're going to excel. And that's also what the colleges want. The admissions officers on the back end want to ensure that the students that are going to their school, they're not going to drop out. So they want to make sure that this student is well-rounded enough and a right fit. And that's why things like the interviews are important. So all of these factors come into play.
Yeah. So great points, Jeremy. And Sandy, thank you so much for asking, and Debbie highlighting the mental wellness aspect. One of the reasons I ended up going back to get my clinical license was in doing this work. I said, I'm seeing in 17 years as a school counselor and then 10 years as a private college advisor, the mental wellness of these students is very important, and really understanding their mindset and then restructuring from a cognitive behavioral standpoint. That's my theoretical approach, in understanding that, listen, you are a solid, strong, excellent student. You have to believe in yourself. When you're hearing comments in the film, and it mimics what I hear, after 3.5 years, I did all this hard work for nothing. I'm a failure. You're a failure because you didn't get to an Ivy League school, but yet you have a full ride to another prominent college. So really understanding what is their cognitive understanding of this process, then restructuring that to help them understand that what are some of these maladaptive thoughts that you're having, and let's look at those thoughts and really challenge them and saying, now do you see the reality of it? Because at the end of the day, all of these students have gone on and done wonderful things. Did they have to go through that agonizing process that we just watched to really get to a school that they needed to get to?
Yeah.
My answer would be no. And I think that we really have to be mindful of these young individuals that are high school students, because their mental wellness to me is the most important thing, because a confident person will be a successful person.
For
I
sure.
think that's really something that's important.
Debbie, somebody wrote into the chat, terrific film. Can you tell us something about the process of working with these kids and their parents and the school?
Yeah, we felt very honored, our whole team, to have the opportunity to tell the story. Lowell High School.
You have free reign? Did you have free reign?
We made when we sort of cast for the film, what we did was we interviewed hundreds and hundreds of kids. And we worked with students who were very open to being filmed, for one thing. But frankly, there were so many kids that really wanted their story to be told, because I feel like they understood what they were up against and just how crazy it's gotten. We were very lucky, the high school principal at the time, Andrew Ishibashi, you can see a little snippet of him in one of the scenes, he really understood our mission and was super supportive and welcoming. And all of those teachers, Mr. Shapiro and all, and it was sort of the physics department, physics wing. I mean, I call it a department because it really did feel very collegiate at that high school. They let us and our small crew take over their physics office, which is a tiny little cramped room for our staging. And they just really welcomed us. So I think, a lot of it too was just, we had certain boundaries, like I knew I didn't want to tell a story like that made a student feel regretful later on in life. But yeah, we worked with the students and the parents about, because they were all minors at the time.
And the parents were willing participants?
Well, yeah, and what happened was, in a way, the way the story evolved, possibly because of my original intent, which was to look at it from a mother's perspective, is that it kind of naturally emerged that the kids that we were really interested in had these sort of maternal figures in the background, very with commonalities and differences, but with a very strong presence or lack of presence, and that was kind of a unifying thing. And if you do see the longer version, the full feature version. The moms have a bigger part in that film, in that version, and we go home with them. But you know, it was they were really supportive. Yeah, I was kind of blown away by all three of the moms that are prominently featured. So there's Alvin's mom, Rachel's mom, and Ian's mom. And you know, Ian's mom was a Lowell High School alum, as was his father. And she's just, you know, so low key. She got in trouble like his junior year because he didn't want, she said, no, you cannot take more than 2 APs in your junior year. And all of his friends were giving him a really hard time. And she's like, oh no, now you can't, now you don't qualify for, you know, this college or that college. And so in the end, you know, but in the end, he loved his experience at Emory University. He stayed on, he's still in Atlanta right now. He's actually a teacher. And I was telling everyone before we came on that he has students very different from the students that he grew up with. They're Title I students. You know, getting kids to graduate from high school is challenging at the school where he's teaching. But one of his students just got into Stanford. He just texted me yesterday. He's like, I got it. So, and he was just over the moon about it, you know. No hard feelings, super excited for him. But yeah, we you know, we were very, very, we really felt the community support in making the film.
Well, to that end, someone has written that he or she wonders if the parents have a different point of view after watching and being part of the film, and if they would do anything different in parenting their children.
Yeah, well, sometimes they do come to the Q&A sometimes. You know, Rachel's mom, Donna, you know, many people ask if she can participate, and she, you know, she loves, I mean, she can be shy about it, but at the same time, once you get her going, she had so much to say. No regrets. No regrets.
She was, I mean, hello, that woman was in that movie. I mean, it was crazy. I mean, and then when she dropped her daughter off at Brown, I mean, I you know, I would have bet money that she was going to be a roommate. You know, I'll sleep in the other bed.
One of the scenes that we actually had to cut, we didn't get to include, was for prom, and her mom actually did get the room. And she did stay there. So yeah, there's more truth to it than not. But
okay, but so the parents, for the most part, were fairly positive feeling positive after watching the doc.
Yeah, I mean, I sat in our when we premiered at Sundance Film Festival. It was in COVID, so it was really weird, but there was a drive-in experience part of it, and I actually sat in the car with Alvin and his parents when we watched it, and that was, you know, you can't do justice to Alvin's mom, and you know, as like in a few minutes. She's a very complex and very loving figure in her very traditionally Taiwanese way. Mm-hmm. And you know, some of that doesn't translate in you know, a few minutes of screen time. But yeah, I mean, I think the only thing that she had to say was, my son is he's not as good as Ian. That's what she said to me. You know,
somebody wrote here just this comment: the principal of Lowell resigned today. I can't access the full article. Do you know that?
Yeah, we're still very in touch with the community, and I mean, Lowell High School has been through the ringer in the last couple of years during the pandemic, and there's just been no one really knows why yet. But he was only there this was his first year.
Oh, wow.
So
wow, he probably didn't know what he was getting into, huh? On some level. I wanted to know from you, Jeremy, and you, Frank, how you viewed this film. What kind of an impact did it have on you personally and professionally?
For me personally, obviously this film is a snapshot. right, into one particular district and the challenges that face those particular students. But so much has also changed since COVID as far as the work that we do with regard to test prep, college counseling. It's a completely different world out there. So on top of all of the challenges that students had in 2017 when this film was shot, you have to remember now they've been remote in most cases for a minimum of a year, many longer than that. So what you're seeing is these kids are returning to school with a lot of deficits, interpersonal skills, understanding, just kind of the gaps with where they may be as far as their instruction and learning. So much has changed as far as test prep. The majority of colleges have gone test optional. And as you indicated at the start, UCal schools have actually scrapped the SAT. And, Black Lives Matter also had a big impact on the movement, saying that, that standardized tests are discriminatory. So there's been this shift to make things more accessible. I think one of the things that we do in our company is, we feel that test prep and access to, tutors and affordable preparation should be accessible to all students, because in many cases, Title I districts just don't have access to it, or parents are not informed about, they don't have the ability to be informed in the way that the Lowell parents are, because they're always working, or they may be first generation. There's so many different factors that come into play. But I think, the key is understanding that, the challenges that families are dealing with today as a result of the pandemic, it's even heightened from what it was in 2017. And a lot of things have shifted with regard to test prep, with regard to colleges. Colleges have actually, gotten more competitive, because as a result of colleges going test optional, and Frank can speak to that, they've had a higher number of applicants applying. So what's happening is, they're even becoming more selective. So there's a lot more pressure that's being put on students, and understanding how to navigate this post-COVID world with regard to academics, test prep, the college process. It's even greater now than it was in 2017.
Yeah. For me, I think it really reaffirmed kind of my philosophy and my approach to these students and families, because to watch those high school students go through that, I really do believe that it's changed, as Jeremy has mentioned. When you look at the landscape and you look at the GPAs and SAT scores, it's no longer just about GPAs and SAT scores and AP exams. It's really more about a holistic approach of, shine creatively, or what else have you done? What does your resume look like? What does your civic engagement look like? And then I think, in the film, one of the things that really stood out to me, one of the admissions representatives said, raise your hand if you want to go to school with everyone being like you. And no one raised their hand. So that really just shows you that they're looking for diversity on their campuses. They don't want just a high achieving. How about student that didn't have accessibility to certain things and they have a story to tell? And I thought it was really interesting that at the end, when you see Shay get into Stanford, look at Shay's story. His dad, and almost evicted from his apartment, almost had to leave the school. And at the end, his shift in mentality from, if I don't get into a top 20 school, I think it was environmental science that he wanted to go for, I would be a failure, to now accepting that I will make the college process what I want it to be, and I will definitely make it the most for me. I think that shift reaffirmed for me, and I really just love that it did that for me, because sometimes I question, should I push these students to a point that maybe you've seen an Alvin? And, it just reaffirmed that I'm stick with what the approach that I'm taking.
Boy, did I had it big time for Shay. Let me just add, do you want to come live with me, Shay? I adored that kid. Somebody wrote, I wonder if Debbie and the crew got to talk to John Chus' family. Really curious what the parenting style is like and if he is happy.
That is the first time anyone has asked me that question. That's so interesting. Jonathan Chu, the Lowell God, we didn't actually talk to his parents. We talked to him, but we didn't spend as much time with him as other students because we knew there wasn't much of a mystery to his story. From a filmmaker's point of view, it was pretty predictable. And he really did get into, I mean, I think for him, he said, oh, I'm just like everyone else. I didn't get into my dream school because he had hoped to get into Harvard and this Boston Conservatory of Music program. And he did, but he didn't get into the joint program for both of them. So, but it was, all I know about his parents, from what I heard from hearsay, is that, he actually had classically, traditionally sort of Asian parents and way. So he kind of was like just the dream Asian kid, for, so really annoying probably to most kids and other parents, because, hard to measure up, but I never actually spoke to them. And so I don't have the answer there. But he's a really sweet kid. The thing that I really loved about Jonathan Chu is that he really was the hero of the school, that he had been their class president from freshman year. So freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, senior year. By the time he became a senior, he said, I'll let someone else be the class president. And he became the overall student body president. And the students really adored him, but he wasn't like the stereotype of the football player. He was a really nice guy, really humble, like very low key and self-deprecating, so he was just kind of, as someone of, who's Asian American, and, there are cultural differences, I think, in the way that you're raised. I grew up not in California. I grew up in the Midwest, where we were a total minority. I went to school on the East Coast. You do notice there are cultural differences, but he was a very kind of like, if from an Asian perspective, he would be like, the dream kid, which interesting. I thought it was interesting that he did so well today, because, maybe in other years, he may not have been such a standout candidate. I don't know. Yeah.
How did this documentary impact you? How did making this documentary impact you?
Well, oh my gosh. I mean, I'm a parent, so it was like having an insider's perspective on all the things that you should and shouldn't do. I'm hoping, hopefully I'll be a little bit less pressurized on my kids when they get to that point. But, just, I think for me, I feel pretty hopeful about the way, you kind of go through stages, because I had no idea, even though I read all about it. I even saw my sister's kids go through it. I could see, the low odds, like how difficult it is to get to college, but to actually watch students go through that firsthand and watch the wind get knocked out of their sails, it's really brutal. And it's a lot harder than what it seems like it should be. But at the end of it, now that the film has come out and you see where the kids are on the other side, they're just like, they make you feel really good about humanity. Yeah.
Well, I have to say, as we wrap up this really interesting talk back, your film was powerful and potent. And there were times I was screaming at the screen, and I had a visceral reaction. Honestly, Debbie, after I watched your movie, I was fried, but that's a good thing. And that's the power of the documentary that just can't be dismissed. That's why documentaries are so wonderful. And we thank you for the work that you do, as well as Dr. Frank Andrasani and Jeremy Lentz. Thank you so much for participating in the Talkback, and Debbie for making a really, really powerful documentary. And of course, hats off to the Teaneck Film Festival. And I'm going to send it over to Jeremy, who's going to wrap this up for the evening.
Thank you, Sandy. Thank you for moderating our final film in the Independent Lens series. We thank you all out there watching for your support. We want to remind you that this series is free. So we ask that you consider a donation by clicking the donate button on top to support our festival. And tonight we're wrapping up Independent Lens, but we want to let you know that TIFF will be back bigger and better than ever in November, where we will be presenting our next festival on November 11th to November 13th. We will be virtual and then in person returning to Teaneck Cinemas on Thursday, November 17th through the 20th. So mark your calendars. That'll be November 11th through the 20th, and we will be in person and also virtual. So there'll be something for everyone. And we look forward to seeing you all back in November for another year of activism making change. Debbie, Frank, Sandy, thank you all, and we'll see you in the fall.